In this video, I'm going to share with you wide receivers that I'm going to be fading in those later rounds. And I got a couple of replacements for you guys. These are guys that you can get usually later than these players. Let's get into it, man. I'm Ron from Never Lucky Fantasy. And the first guy on my list is going to be Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley, you don't want to draft this guy, man. At wide receiver 36, he's being gassed up by a lot of people in the industry. I understand why. There's a lot of excitement around Cameron Ward, new quarterback, rookie quarterback for the Titans. He's kind of the only real, like, proven wide receiver on the team. And a lot of people are thinking that, Calvin Ridley is going to have a huge season ahead of him, right? They're kind of envisioning a little bit of like a Terry McLaurin type of output, right? Because Terry McLaurin did kind of the same. He gets Jaden Daniels. We knew he was very talented. Gets this rookie quarterback, pops the fuck off, becomes, a top 12 wide receiver. Now, I think that's not going to happen, right? So let's talk about Calvin Ridley. Let's discuss kind of what he did last season. I'm going to explain to you why I don't think he's going to have a similar type of path that Terry McLaurin had. So he was wide receiver 26 from week 9 on. That was after DeAndre Hopkins gets shipped off to the Ravens. So it's really just Calvin Ridley, and it's Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who actually had his fair share of touchdowns, fair share of output, to be fair. But despite that, Calvin Ridley was really the only guy. He still had Will Levis at the time and then became Mason Rudolph. But for the most part, wide receiver 26, nothing really to write home about, right? He had 199 fantasy points on 120 targets. So I crunched some numbers. I did a little bit of digging. That comes out to a 1.7 fantasy points per target. Now, what I did, this is super fucking nerdy, but I created like a correlation formula to see like the correlation between different metrics and fantasy points. Super simple in Google Excel or Google Sheets. And it spits out a number, right? So the amount of targets a player gets has like a 0.6 correlation with fantasy points, meaning between 0 and 1, holy fuck, this is super nerdy. I might cut this out. Between 0 and 1, the closer to 1, the more correlation there is. And it had a 0.6, which anything over 0.5 has a strong correlation. Just to give you guys a little bit of background. So targets is directly correlated with fantasy points. And he had a 1.7 fantasy points, which puts him actually pretty poor, especially for an X receiver, like a deep threat, down the field receiver. Usually what you would see is that they'd have low targets, high fantasy points, right? If they're catching them, if they're getting touchdowns. So it was pretty low, man. Just for reference, Terry McLaurin last year, who fits a very similar mold, had 267 fantasy points on 117 targets. It's 2.3 fantasy points per target. Stick with me here, man. So Devontae Smith, another player, he had the same amount of fantasy points as Calvin Ridley, but with 31 less targets. So I'm painting a little bit of a picture that on a per touch or per target basis, Calvin Ridley is actually quite bad, especially for a deep threat guy. It just doesn't make sense. Usually we see these deep threat wide receivers be really good on like a per target or per catch basis. So you can chalk that up to poor quarterback play, poor offense, poor system. Chalk it up to whatever you want, but I think there's not much that's going to improve in that department, right? I know they get a rookie quarterback, Cam Ward, the first quarterback off the board, but that to me is like it's ambiguity, right? You have a rookie quarterback now. I think more often than not, you don't get the Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin stack, right? That doesn't happen where a rookie comes in and a proven but older veteran suddenly becomes relevant. It just doesn't happen very often. It's not like it's mostly a statistical outlier. All right, holy fuck, dude. I hope you're still with me. So the Titans are expected to be the 26th ranked offense. Las Vegas, they do their projections, they do their win-losses. We look at like strength of schedule based on the win-loss of the teams that they're going to be playing from last season. So it's not that predictive, and it doesn't carry over that much. Teams change. Some teams become better. Some teams become shittier. But for the most part, we kind of can spit out a little bit of a projections. And he's turning 30. That's like the last point that I wanted to cover. So Calvin Ridley's a fade, man. He's just somebody that at wide receiver 36, I'm just a little bit worried about the fact that I think he's being overbought. And instead of Calvin Ridley, I think you guys should really consider Josh Downs at wide receiver 46. So he's going 10 spots later. Now, the Colts have that 12th easiest schedule, but the 21st in projected points scored. So 12th easiest schedule is a good thing for the Colts, right? For a team that's not projected to win a lot of games, they have a fairly easy schedule, right? And I think they're gonna beat most of their projections. I think they're gonna score more points than we predict, so better than 21st. And I think They're going to have a slightly better win-loss. They're projected to have like 6.5 wins or 7 wins, depending on when you look. So I think they're going to have a slight improvement. Now, Josh Downs, the reason I love him is that he has charted impressively in a lot of like advanced metrics. So he's only 23 years old. He had a 2.2 yards per route run and a 27.5 targets per route run, or 27.5% targets per route run. Just for some reference, that puts him in the echelon or in the tier of like a CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, and better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, and one little note is that he was actually better with Anthony Richardson, right? Like you would have thought that with Joe Flacco that he was better, but in fact, Anthony Richardson and him had a really good connection. And I think if Anthony Richardson remains the starter, which I think he should be, right? Like I think it'll be silly if they go to a guy like Daniel Jones, who, what is he, dude? He's not the future. He's not the past either, right? He's fucking long neck Daniel Jones. So I don't know why they would go to him. I think they're going to stick with Richardson. I think hopefully he makes some strides as a passer. And if he does, it's wheels fucking up for Josh Downs, dude. It's Josh Downs wheels up. Hey. So another little chart that I saw from Fusue Devi Yusuf. Wide receivers have posted an 80 plus receiving grade on man and versus zone in 2024. It's a very short list. It's got guys like Puka, Nico, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, Chris Godwin, and then Josh Downs. Short list, end of list. That means he's good against both man and versus zone. Exactly what you want. And he plays out of the slot too. So you figure there's going to be some manufactured touches for him too in that realm. So one more chart on Josh Downs, and then we'll move along. Separation scores by route breaks. So horizontal and vertical route breaks. How do these players separate? Josh Downs up here, a man alone, dude. A man alone. So he very good on vertical routes. He's basically second in the NFL in vertical routes. And he's like, I don't know, what is this? Like 8th or 6th in horizontal. Again, you fucking love it, dude. You love a player that's versatile. You love a player that is good against man and zone, good on horizontal, good on vertical, good yards per route run, good involvement, good opportunity share. Holy fuck, dude. That is like the makeup of a breakout candidate. And stay tuned, man. He's going to be one of my sleeper candidates. This is going to be a league-winning type guy that I'm going to plant my flag on this season. So next player that I think you need to stay away from, bro. You do not. This one pains me, man. This one hurts. This one hurts, dude. I'm hurt. Cue that fucking Philadelphia Eagles fan.
I'm hurt. I love my Eagles. I don't believe it.
You gonna flap the hat one more time for the Eagles with a hard fight they did?
Let's go, birds fly, Eagles fly. Still Super Bowl chance for now.
Don't draft Chris Godwin, wide receiver 28. This one pains me, but let's talk about Chris Godwin, man. He averaged 16.1 fantasy points per game through week 7. He was the wide receiver 2 pace, man, in PPR. So he was absolutely cooking. He was in this Cooper Kupp role for Liam Cohen in the Bucks offense last season. And I think it would have held up if he didn't get that absolutely gruesome ankle injury. I think he would have ended the season as like a top 10 at least, right? As I mentioned, man, he bent his ankle in ways I didn't know were possible. Like if you watch the video of him, dislocating his ankle, it's absolutely gruesome. And here are the factors as to why I'm not excited about him. So after he gets the ankle injury, we get the Jalen McMillan breakout. It happens a little bit later, right? Like from weeks, I think 14 on, Jalen McMillan really pops, gets like 20 fantasy points a game. And he becomes like a staple of their offense, of their depleted offense, but still he emerges. They then sign Chris Godwin to a 3-year, $66 million extension. So we're like, okay, McMillan emerged, but you got Godwin on a nice contract. Mike Evans is getting a little bit older, but he's still productive. So it looks like Godwin might be able to return value. And then they draft Emeka Egbuka with a very high draft capital. And he plays a very similar position to Chris Godwin. So you have dude coming off an ankle injury. You have Jalen McMillan emergence. They draft Emeka Egbuka, who kind of fits the same role as Chris Godwin, like a big slot type player. And, you still have Mike Evans. You have Bucky Irving emerging. You still have Rashad White as a pass catcher. Liam Cohen is now gone. So this could be tough, man. This could be, brutal for the Buccaneers in general. I just think, I love him, man. I respect what he did, but, he's another year older, coming off a bad injury, a lot more mouths to feed. I'm just iffy with him, dude. If he was like my wide receiver 3, maybe even my 4th wide receiver, I'd feel a little bit better. If he's my wide receiver 4, like my 4th wide receiver off the board, and I have a lot of running backs in that area that he's being drafted, which I don't see that happening because he's just going so early. I just can't do it, dude. I'm off him. And instead of him, I'll be drafting Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 31. So only 3 spots later than our boy Chris Godwin, but he's got so much more upside, in my opinion, dude. Just not even just in the role that he plays for the Dolphins, but even in his profile. So let's talk about it, man. So in 2024, the Dolphins offense, they became just a dink and dunk to Achan and Jonnu. Tyreek Hill and Waddle were basically like having a Ferrari and a Lambo, just chilling in the garage collecting dust. They were not doing anything. They're not getting any targets, barely any big splash plays. The Dolphins offense was brutal to watch. It was absolutely decrepit. And I just hope, dude, I hope that Mike McDaniel over the offseason fucking takes a spirit journey, dude. Go to India, take some LSD, dude. Fucking get some prostitutes. Do whatever you need to do, man. Find out or figure out, rediscover your roots that the Miami Dolphins are a pass first team, or they should be. There and in their peak, it was fucking deep shots to Tyreek Hill, deep shots to Jalen Waddle, these, intermediate crossing routes, yards after the catch. He comes from like the Kyle Shanahan tree. And early on in his career, he very much had this Kyle Shanahan type of offense, right? And then he leaned super hard into the Shanahan fucking meta, and he just became a run team, right? And Shanahan gets stuck in those types of, vortexes as well, where he just wants to run the ball, doesn't use these super good receivers that he has, like these, George Kittles, Brandon Ayuk's, fucking Debo Samuel. He gets cute, right, with the run game. And that's what fucking Mike McDaniel did, man. Maybe you could say it's to save Tua and to protect him, but at the end of the day, Jalen Waddle's 26 years old. He was a top 12 receiver before, earlier in his career. I think he can get back to that. Now, why do I think he can emerge and actually get back to that? Because Tyreek Hill, dude, is cooked. The man is dust. He's dealing with off-season surgeries. He had like 2 surgeries in the off-season to fix his shoulder. He got arrested last season. He's 31. I think there's going to be a changing of the guard. I think his statistical efficiency has declined a little bit last season. Now, again, you can say it's because of all those factors I just said. Probably, right? I still think Tyreek has some left in the tank to be productive on his own. But I think the disparity between Tyreek and Waddle will dissipate. It will reduce. So it will be a closer like 1A, 1B type situation. I just truly believe that, right? Like Tyreek Hill's 31, man. Jalen Waddle is still 26. You could say that's in his prime. It's in their interest to kind of, reduce the disparity, to slowly, hand the reins over to Jalen Waddle to see how much they got left in him, right? Before they might want to move on from him as well. So last year, dude, I will eat a bag of shit in this. I was targeting Jalen Waddle in the 2nd round, thinking that change will happen last year. I'll eat a bag of shit, dude. I took a dump all over my own leg there. I think a lot of fantasy analysts did. A lot of people were touting him as like a sleeper pick with a lot of the same metrics showing us like, upside. But this year at wide receiver 31, that's a fucking value, dude. You can get him instead of Chris Godwin, as I mentioned. And we got a couple more names, dude. We got 2 more names to give to you that I'm going to give to you guys. Real quick before I continue, man, if you like this video, if you appreciate this type of video, if you want to see more of these types of player comparisons, hit me up with a like, man. Let me know down in the comments which players you'd like me to compare. And while you're down there, dude, and if you're new here, a subscribe would be super helpful. It would, let me know that what I'm doing is actually nice or that you guys enjoy it. It would be the best way to show support and show me you guys like this stuff. Anyway, let's get back into it. The next player that you cannot draft. You should not draft this man. This one also pains me because I love him. It's Debo Samuel at wide receiver 40. Look, 39.7% success rate versus man coverage. One of the lowest marks ever charted. The guy cannot get open if he's being covered in man defense. Just absolutely horrendous beat for Debo on tape. Statistically, he just did not look good. He struggles to separate, man. He just cannot separate. That's why I think the 49ers used him a lot in like yards after the catch, close to the line of scrimmage, because he's not a very traditional wide receiver. He doesn't separate very well. And he's now a year older. He's now on a new team. He's not going to be the focal point of this new team. Although the Commanders do like to dink and dunk. They are like a horizontal, they call it like a horizontal air raid offense where they pass to the outside, like slant routes, curl routes, and then they'll throw deep, and then they want to run the ball. So that could fit Debo's profile, but he's approaching 30 years old, man. I just envision him as being more effective as like a real life player, not so much in fantasy, as like a fantasy producer, big, high volume guy. I can see like 600 receiving yards, maybe 300 or 250 rushing yards, maybe like 5 combined touchdowns. Not going to bring back the value, dude, at wide receiver 40, unfortunately. I think he's going to be outside of like the top 40 wide receivers, unfortunately. And he just costs a little bit too much, dude. Um, he's going to have his moments definitely during the season, but he just costs too much. When one pick later, you could draft Jawan Jennings at wide receiver 41. So exactly one pick later, as of June 5th. So Jawan Jennings had a 2.26 yards per route run. That's 13th in the NFL. 24.2% targets per route run. That's 18th. So he's in the top 20 in both categories. 13th in yards per route run. Very good. Both of those metrics are very indicative of future success or fantasy production. Puts him on par with guys like Brian Thomas Jr. and T. Higgins. So that's kind of where he falls in terms of a profile, in terms of his statistical production. So another thing, that in 6 games, when it was Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, George Kittle, and Brock Purdy all on the field together, he had a 31.3% first read target share. Like, anything above like 26 or 25% is like really good, right, in first read. And when you account for the fact that that's probably what the offense is going to look like, maybe you add Brandon Ayuk to that, maybe it goes down a little bit. But when he was on the field with all those other guys, he was the first read target. It was all him. He was the absolute alpha. I'm going to put up this chart here where it's the same chart that I showed earlier. It's average separation scores by route break. And you see that he's over here next to Tyreek Hill, sandwiched in between Jordan Addison and Tyreek Hill, just above the trend lines on both the X and the Y axis. So he's pretty good in horizontal, pretty good in vertical, passes the smell test. He charts well on both of those. So we're excited about him. He should be like, if not the 1A, the 1B. I don't think they're very happy with Brandon Ayuk. I don't think Brandon Ayuk's very happy with the coaching staff there in San Francisco. And, he's coming off an ACL injury, so you don't know how Brandon Ayuk's going to be. Part of what made Brandon Ayuk so good was that he was such a good route runner, and he had that like quick burst agility speed, right? Is he going to have that after an ACL injury, right? Like, we just don't know. So it could be the case that they move to Jawan Jennings, who's just has been productive for them and will continue to be productive. Maybe they look at Ricky Pearsall a little bit more as well, and they kind of just slowly move away from Brandon Ayuk. So Jawan Jennings is somebody that I really like over Deebo Samuel. Those were 3 wide receivers you should fade and 3 wide receivers you should get as replacements that I'll be targeting. Hope you guys liked this video, man. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit your boy up with a like and a sub, as I mentioned earlier. And I'll catch you guys next time, man. Peace.